This edition of Mac Voices is brought to you by Harry's, the shaving gear you will respect, not throw away. To get $5 off your first order, go to harrys.com and use the offer code MacVoices. Welcome back to Mac Voices. This is the Talk in the Mac community. I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, fresh from Macworld iWorld 2014, Mr. Joe Kissell. Joe, it's great to see you. It was great to see you in San Francisco, and now I get to see you again.
Yay! Yes, it was great to see you, Chuck, as I do every year, and also great to see so many people. I mean, a lot of people that I met came up to me and said, "Oh, you know, I listen to you on Chuck Joyner's show all the time, and it was really great to meet some of you. So, hi, and nice to meet you. And for those of you who didn't make it, come next year. I'm sure I'll be there, and a good time will be had by all."
It's always fun getting to meet the people that watch and listen. You suddenly realize that, hey, somebody really does watch this stuff and listen to this stuff. And,
well, you know,
and benefits from it.
You know, as an author, I have a sort of, I'm disconnected from my audience most of the time. I mean, I love getting in front of an audience and doing a talk where I get live feedback. So I do that as much as I can. But most of the time, I type something and then it goes on sale, and maybe someone will write in with a question or a comment or whatever, and that's fine. But I don't really have a sense of what's happening. So I kind of felt like a rock star at Macworld, because like a lot of people were saying, "Oh, I am such a big fan. I have all of your books." Two people, like literally, so I did four sessions, or 4 or 5, anyway, a bunch of sessions and a bunch of talks. And after the last one, right before the last one, this guy in the front row said, and in apparently all seriousness, I've been to all 4 of your sessions. Do you have like a stamp that you can put on my badge? I'm like, well, no, I could autograph your badge. He's like, yeah, do that. He pulls out his badge and I autograph it. Then the guy next to him is like, "Oh, I've been to all of your sessions too. Can you autograph my badge?" I'm like, sure. So that was kind of awesome. One woman also came to all of my sessions, and she's like, I bought all of your books except for one, the one that I thought was most intimidating, and that was your book on Thanksgiving dinner. So I'm like, you know, I'm just going to give you a free copy, and You shouldn't be without one of them. I mean, you got to have the complete set, and I'm sure that you won't find it intimidating anymore after you actually read it. So, but anyway, there were so many moments like that where I got to meet people and get like live interaction and feedback about the stuff I've written, which I just thought was so cool. It was so gratifying, and it really energized me in ways that I seldom experience. So that was great.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I didn't do any autographs. Although, folks, you have a year to plan now. So get to Macworld next year, and this time make sure that Joe knows he's arrived, because ask him to autograph a body part.
A body part, you know, I'd be happy to sign your iPad screen, or
oh, jeez. Okay.
You know,
I didn't suggest that one. I'm just going with the body part. So. Well, anyway, I agree.
We'll see.
Yeah, it was a great time, and folks, you know, it really does. It means a lot to all of us, you know, that you do come up and say hello. I sincerely hope we're not intimidating in any fashion, because it's just always nice to meet you. So
we're harmless. We're just ordinary folk. You know, we have. You know, we're just ordinary folk. So yeah absolutely.
Yeah.
Send us email. Come say hi. We'd be happy to meet you.
Yeah, you've got some family events coming up. I've got a huge pile of laundry. We're just ordinary folks.
That's right. I'm wondering, like, every time something beeps, I'm like, is that my wife saying she's going into labor right now? Because that could happen. You could witness that drama, not the actual drama of the anyway, but you could witness me going, oh, I got to run. So
yeah. So if this gets cut
life
short,
goes on.
Yeah, we'll know what happened. Yeah. Joe, this time, I don't know if this is your biggest project, but for me, it feels like it's got to be one of the biggest. Take control of the cloud, not just iCloud, not just any cloud, but the cloud. That's a pretty potentially intimidating topic, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it is. It was a weird book to write. I've wanted to write this for a couple of years now. I think it was 3 Macworlds ago. Tanya and I and Michael Cohen were all sitting having drinks somewhere, and we were kind of brainstorming ideas for new books. And there are lots of like individual subjects we've written about, a book about Dropbox, or a book about iCloud, or a book about 1Password, or whatever, and those are great. But I just had this realization that I think we need to step back from these specific products and services and make sense of the cloud as a whole. I think we really need to take control of the cloud, because it's confusing. I mean, and I'm speaking as someone who has used the cloud for a long time and has done a lot of research about it. If you just start Googling like the cloud or cloud computing or cloud services or whatever, you're going to encounter some wacky stuff that is over almost everybody's head. And as I talk to people on those great occasions when I get to speak to people face to face, in a user group or some kind of other meeting, I watch people's expressions as I use terms like the cloud, and you can see them kind of going, I think I might know approximately what he's talking about, but I'm not really sure. And there was this survey done in 2012 that I think I have the numbers. I'm looking on my screen as we're talking. It didn't occur to me that I'd need to come up with this, but oh yeah. So in 2012, a survey of 1,000 adult Americans indicated that 51% of them believed stormy weather could interfere with cloud computing. 29% thought the cloud was an actual cloud, and only 16% had a pretty good idea what the cloud actually is. So when I see stuff like that, which I do, I kind of go, ooh, we as tech professionals have failed you, the public, by coming up with this great buzzword, the cloud, that we seem to apply to everything, cloud this, cloud that, and that's supposed to be, magically better for you somehow. But we haven't really explained what it is, what you can do with it, why you should care, why it's anything different from what we had before there was the cloud. And so this book is my perhaps quixotic attempt to demystify all that and help people make sense of the cloud.
Okay. That's, and it's a big job or a big task to take on, because the cloud can mean so many things in so many different areas, to so many different people.
Oh, absolutely.
And there was a time, Joe, that I was convinced, no, not convinced, but I just hadn't been sold on the cloud yet, and all the benefits that could come from it. And then, and you're one of the reasons I started adopting things and adopting this and adopting that, and all of a sudden it's like, gee, how did I kind of ever exist before this? It's just tough to remember.
Yeah. Well, there are people for whom the cloud is so indispensable that there would be no possibility to function without it. There are other people who are incredibly afraid of the cloud, sometimes for good reasons, and a lot of people who are using parts of the cloud without actually realizing it. One of the things I sort of say at the very beginning of the book is, there isn't like some exact definition of the cloud that everyone agrees on. And a lot of marketing people use it in idiosyncratic ways, and sometimes the people using the term cloud don't even realize what it means. It's not like some governing body of the internet said cloud means this. It's just like this term that everybody has kind of glommed onto. So, back in the olden days, like the early 90s, when the term cloud started to be bandied about, it was just really a metaphor for the internet, because like people would draw diagrams of like, your computer and a little line to your modem, and then a line going out of your house to a cloud, and then over someplace else there's another line going to somebody else's house, and the image of a cloud is like, well, it's a lot of networks and routers and computers and wires and stuff. We don't know or care what is in this fuzzy mass. It's just a thing, and then somebody connects to the other side of it. So people have been using that image for a long time, but in recent years it has come to mean something more specific than the internet. because you talk about cloud computing, and well, okay, I have a computer, and there's also lots of computers everywhere else on the internet. But how is a computer that's on the internet different from another computer that's on the internet? What does that really mean? And so, I sort of delve into what the specific sense is that most people mean when they say cloud nowadays, even if they don't realize it. And it's basically this idea that you no longer have just one computer, some server or some PC or some rack-mounted server in a data center someplace giving you one set of services. It's a single FTP server or web server or email server. What you instead have is massive clusters of servers in multiple geographical locations that work together to give you services. And a lot of these servers aren't even physical servers, they're virtual. So it's like you use virtual PC, VMware Fusion. That's back. Speaking of the olden days, VMware Fusion or VirtualBox or Parallels Desktop to run a copy of Windows on your Mac. So it's the same kind of thing. You can cluster a whole bunch of computers together and make a sort of big virtual computing platform out of them, and then you can install many different virtual copies of whatever, Linux or what have you, and then the people or companies running those virtual servers, if they decide they need more storage or RAM or bandwidth or whatever it is, they can just sort of shrink and expand them at will, rather than saying, well, I'm going to have to buy a new server and put it in a rack and install software on it, and then hope that it's not too big, and then hope that it's big enough for whatever my load is. So cloud computing is sort of this idea that I need to get something done, and it needs the services of computers someplace else, and they need to be reachable from everywhere. So to ensure that, I'm going to use this service that has this big distributed network, so that if one computer in one place goes down, it's not a problem. The service keeps running. There's other computers in other places, and it will be able to continue handling the data no matter how much of it it needs to process.
So the best way to describe it, I guess, well, if you've worked in an office that has something installed on a server, a program on the server, it's like that, but it also just means that it's not necessarily on your local network, it's across the internet. Is that a good example?
My description of cloud computing, I can boil it down to 3 words: somebody else's problem. So
I like it.
Like I can install an app on my Mac, or I can install a server, a file server on my desk or whatever. But that's my problem. I have to, if a hard drive dies, I got to fix it. If a network thing goes out, a power supply goes bad, I have to fix it. I have to upgrade software. I have to upgrade the hardware. I am responsible for it. The cloud is basically most of the same things you can do on your own hardware. It's storage, it's syncing, it's apps, it's all kinds of services. But somebody else is worrying about the hardware, the operating system upgrades, the application updates, the maintenance, all those things. It's somebody else's problem. So that's wonderful in a sense that you can stop worrying about stuff. All you really worry about is paying some company or many companies a certain amount of money every month or every year to keep dealing with that stuff for you. But you don't have to worry about installing software. So let's take Google Docs. You can do word processing and spreadsheets and presentations and stuff in a browser window. Google can go ahead and update the capabilities of these apps whenever it wants to. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to install any software on your Mac or PC. You just have to have a web browser. And Google takes care of the file storage. It takes care of the backups. It takes care of all the maintenance, like all that stuff. It just happens someplace else. There are advantages to this. There are disadvantages to this, whether you're talking about storage or syncing or apps or whatever it is. So I try to lay out that story in this book. I try to say it's not like I'm not trying to sell you on the cloud like it's some panacea. I'm just saying this is what it is. Here are the great things about it. Here are the not so great things about it. And here's what you can do with it. Here's what you ought to worry about. And but it all comes down to the cloud gives you an opportunity to take things off of your desk and put them into somebody else's hands far away.
And that's no small consideration given the fact that things have become so complex and there's so many potentials for conflict. The thing that I love about the concept and the implementation of cloud computing as I've adopted it is that I can pick up my Mac and do some work here and then go across the street, log in on my iPad, and be working on the very same thing.
Right.
Maybe have 15 minutes between appointments, pull up my iPhone, work on that very same thing. So it doesn't matter where I am. A lot of those services are there waiting for me. As long as I have a connectivity, they're waiting for me, and I can use them on any device and not have to do the old file shuffle of trying to figure out where the last version was.
That is exactly correct. I mean, I have, my iPhone and my iPad and my Macs and stuff, and I used to have to really worry: do I have the right file on the right machine? Do I have the right app on the right machine? Is everything synced properly? What if I'm in the wrong place and I don't have the right version of the right thing? But that very rarely happens nowadays. It's not never; it sometimes happens, but most of the time, thanks to the cloud, all of my stuff is everywhere, or at least I have a way to get at it. And that's true even if I buy a new machine, or if I'm using a PC, or I'm using somebody else's equipment. The cloud gives me access to my stuff, my apps and my documents and my data pretty ubiquitously. But you did mention, just sort of in passing, as long as I have an internet connection. Well, thereby hangs a tale. I mean, most of us who live in sort of metropolitan areas of North America take for granted that, well, of course I have great, fast broadband at home and at the office and at the Starbucks and at the library and wherever. And I've got, my iPhone with LTE, and I've got my other whatever devices with pretty much always on high-speed internet connections. But, there are a lot of places, even in North America, even in Southern California, that don't have that. I mean, I don't have to drive very far to get out to, the desert, and there's nothing. There's no bars of cell service. There's no Wi-Fi. There's nothing. There are a lot of people, even in the United States, whose only option for internet connectivity is dial-up service. And it's really easy for those of us who live in, the more populated parts of the world to forget that. And then, never mind, you're living in some other country where, the internet and cell phone service has not spread as far and wide as it has here. And even here in, Southern California, where I've got like all this bandwidth and all these toys, I've had internet outages. There's a little box right there on the shelf behind me that sometimes mysteriously goes offline, needs to be reset, or, the cable company has a problem or whatever, and all of a sudden I find myself without internet access. So that is a consideration when you are doing something in the cloud that is mission critical. Are you too reliant on it? What happens if you are in a situation where you need your data, you need an app, you don't have access to the internet? Then what? And it's a non-trivial issue.
Yeah, it is, and it's not. I mean, we also see it with cell phone service. Most of us have pretty good coverage, depending on where you live, but inevitably there are dead zones. There are dead zones inside buildings, especially inside large warehouses, but also inside some office buildings. Sometimes it just happens to be that you're edge of two cells, and you're under a tree, or you're in the wrong phase of the moon or something, and you don't have coverage. Right. And you're right. If at that particular place, if you really have to have it, you're in trouble. So it's not quite the universal panacea that a lot of a lot of the cloud companies would like you to believe.
Right. And, it's getting better all the time. And it could totally be the case that in the future, we look back on those dark years of like, 2014, you could like basically never get, wireless gigabit access, while you're camping. Can you believe we ever lived like that?
Stone knives and bearskins.
I know, right. So technology marches on, and I'm sure that there will come a point when hardly anybody on the planet even thinks about it anymore. And we can rely more on the cloud than we do now. But even now, I mean, this iPhone happens to have 64 gigabytes of storage, but Apple also sells models with a lot less. And other, smartphone and tablets, even a MacBook Air can come with a very small amount of storage. One of the great things that the cloud does is if you live in a place where you know that you're going to have reliable internet access, you don't have to put like your entire iTunes library, your entire iPhoto library or whatever on every single device. It doesn't really matter because you can just stream your music, you can stream your videos, you can download just the photos you need. As long as all of your stuff is available in the cloud and you have access to it, it doesn't really matter that much how much is stored on any particular device. So it can be very valuable that way.
Joe, let's talk about some cloud services, or I guess that's the best way to refer to them, that a lot of people are going to be familiar with, and ask you just to comment on them.
Sure.
You just touched on the first one I was going to start with, and that is that any of the streaming services, not only are they storing your music in the cloud, but also the subscription services that store more music than you can possibly own and give you access to it.
Right. So, and on the video side, you have the iTunes store, you have Amazon Instant Video, you have Netflix, you have Hulu. On the music side, you have, Spotify and RDO and Pandora and so forth. Almost any sort of entertainment that you want, whether it's videos or music or games, you can get from an online source. And I think what a lot of people may not quite think about is that the process of like, you have an app on your Mac or on your iOS device like Dropbox or something, and you understand that there's my files are stored in the cloud, and this app is a client. It's the way I look at those files and interact with them. But really, your Apple TV is just a container for a bunch of apps. There's basically an iTunes. It doesn't look like it, but really there is a Netflix app and an iTunes app and a bunch of other apps on your Apple TV, on your Roku, on any set-top box, your Amazon Fire. What's it called? The
Amazon Fire TV.
The Amazon Fire TV. There are just too many things, But whatever. All the game consoles, all the set-top boxes. They're just apps, and it's the same thing. Your data is really stored in the cloud someplace, whether that data is really yours personally or whether you're just sort of borrowing it or licensing it or streaming it. It makes possible things that were never practical before. So, I rent movies online all the time. And I watch movies on, Amazon Prime Video and Netflix and stuff. I do not miss the days of like, okay, I have a Blu-ray player. I haven't used the Blu-ray player in like a year because who wants to mess with discs? I mean, it's just a hassle. And then, it doesn't load or it skips or, you got to sit through all the FBI warnings and crap. And it's just a hassle. I can get just as good video quality without having to get up or own or store any physical box of stuff by just buying or renting a movie or a TV series online. So, I do that all the time. And I think that is a marvelous, marvelous thing that the cloud makes not only possible, but great, better than what came before. I'm not really a radio kind of guy, so I don't really listen to the streaming. Like I've used iTunes Radio 3 or 4 times, but that's it really. I consume my music in different ways, but for a lot of people, that is actually the killer feature of the cloud is the music streaming services. But for me, it's more the video stuff, which I am completely addicted to. So yeah, that's a really marvelous thing about the cloud, and entertainment is huge.
This edition of MacVoices is brought to you by Harry's, the shaving gear you will respect, not throw away. Let's talk about razor handles. I know. Seems like a trivial thing, right? Think about it, though. This is the piece of equipment that you use pretty much every day of your life. This is the piece of equipment that is the only thing standing between your face and a razor blade, or 2, or 3, or 4, or 5. Get the wrong one, and you get a poor shave at best, and a bloodletting at worst. That won't happen with Harry's handles. From the Truman, with its zinc alloy core and polymer coating, to the Winston's precision-grade aluminum and comfortable heft, Harry's handles feel good in your hand. Substantial, solid, like a MacBook Air. Not too heavy, not too fragile, just right. Want to give yourself a treat? Check out the Truman SS14 for more stylish colors and a wood end cap, or get your initials engraved on your Winston. Why? Just because. Then pair those with Harry's blades, which fit all of Harry's handles. Each cartridge holds 5, count 'em, 5 separate German engineer blades in a Gothic arch pattern. What's a Gothic arch pattern and why do you care? You can read about it on Harry's website if you're interested, but the important thing to know is that it's important for a good shave. Each cartridge also has a rubber hinge to flex to the contours of your face. Because flexible is good, since you don't want those 5 sharp blades to cut anything other than whiskers. All that adds up to a superior razor and a superior shave. One of life's little treats each morning. And we all need little treats of one kind or another. Why not get yours now and get $5 off your first Harry's order with the offer code MacVoices? Whether you go for just a handle and blade to get started, a shave set to sample handle, blades, and Harry's shaving cream, or dive right in and sign up for a custom shave plan, you can save $5 with the code MacVoices at harrys.com. You're going to love it. Harry's, the shaving gear you will respect, not throw away. Thanks to Harry's for their support of MacVoices. Okay, so let's go to cloud storage. And I'm going to ask you to do a two-pronged thing there. We have the large cloud, they're not quite public cloud, that's not what I mean, but the cloud services that store things on their servers like Dropbox. And then we have this new era of private clouds like the transporter that's sitting over your shoulder. The little blue glowing thing.
Yeah, so you have one over your shoulder and I have one over my shoulder.
Yeah, and they're talking to each other right now.
we should introduce them to each other because, they... Anyway.
Skynet, Joe, Skynet.
I think Skynet would have been a much cooler name than the cloud. Why didn't they call it? Anyway. So let's talk about file storage. So you have your companies, you have Dropbox, you have Box, you have Google Drive, you have Microsoft's OneDrive, formerly known as SkyDrive, you have SugarSync, SpiderOak, Bitcasa. I mean, there's a zillion services that are in this general category where it's online storage space, and the way they normally work is that you get an app for your Mac, your PC, your iOS device, whatever. And you say, okay, this folder or these particular folders, just sync these. So stick these up in the cloud and also copy those down to all of my other devices so that I have all the same data in the same place. So file syncing is sort of one use case for online storage. Then there's a second use case, which is sharing. So it's often the case that once I've got a thing up in the cloud anyway, I can just generate a link to it and send it to you so that you can download it from the cloud without having to go through me. Or maybe I'm sharing a whole folder. So there's a bunch of files in there that we both want to edit and work on. And as soon as you make an edit, it shows up on my machine and vice versa. So there's that type of sharing that's done. And then there's the third use case, which is backup. So what's different about backup is, number one, the cloud service is going to store not just the most recent copy of one of my files, but a whole history of previous versions of the file. Usually it will also store files that I've deleted from my local machine, at least for a while, so that I can go back. I mean, that is sort of the function of a backup, is to get you out of trouble when you accidentally delete something or you need to go back to a previous version of a file. So, and usually these backup services do a lot more than just sync one folder. They let you back up most or all of what's on your computer to the cloud. So there are these three things. There's the syncing across devices, there's the sharing stuff with other people, and then there's backup. Now, some of the storage services offer just one of those features. Some of them offer two, and maybe not always the same two. Some of them offer all three. So when you're shopping for a cloud storage service, you have to consider all these different things, like what am I going to do with this? You can look at prices. One service might cost 10 times as much as a competitor, but maybe that other service also offers a bunch of other features that the first one doesn't. Maybe it integrates with more apps. Maybe all your friends use it, so it's more convenient. There are a whole lot of considerations. So cloud storage is huge. And in the book, I talk about sort of what do you need to care about? Is it just a matter of how many gigabytes I can get for how many dollars? Or do I need to look into various companies' privacy stories? Yes, you do.
Yeah.
What is the encryption story? How easy is it to share stuff? How many of my apps and devices will be able to connect to this? How much hassle is it going to create? I mean, there's a whole long list of things that you need to bear in mind. So I have actually a whole chapter on just that topic of the sort of the various incarnations of cloud storage, and I think it's an incredibly important area, but maybe one that hasn't gotten as much scrutiny as it deserves.
Scrutiny, Joe, from a use case standpoint, or scrutiny from security? Because that's the other thing we obviously have to be talking about with pretty much all of this. If I'm storing stuff in the cloud, that's one issue. If I'm working on, say, a confidential document on Google Docs, that's another issue, because who can look at it, not necessarily even after it's saved, but while I'm actually working on it?
Yeah, well, when I say scrutiny, I mainly am talking about privacy. So Dropbox will tell you, of course, we encrypt all the stuff, like we encrypt the transmission of stuff to and from your Mac using SSL. That's great. Except what about like Heartbleed, and that's not the first and it won't be the last such error where, oops, we suddenly discovered that SSL wasn't secure after all for the last 2 years. Uh-oh. And they also encrypt stuff on their server, which is great, except that Dropbox has the encryption key, so they can decrypt anything they want, and there's nothing but a policy stopping them from doing so. So Google, I'm actually I'm going to be writing an article about some of Google's privacy stuff for Tidbits, and I am in touch with a Google spokesperson, and so I'm hoping to get a spokesperson on the record about some of this stuff. But it's basically, and I'm more focusing on Gmail than Google Docs, but basically the question is, we know. It's evident, it has always been evident that Google is scanning the stuff that I store there, whether it's email or documents, in order to show me ads, in order to filter spam, in order to help me search documents, and that's okay. But under what circumstances could a human employee at Google look at my stuff? Not just a robotic like computer scanner, but like clearly the technology exists that a human being at Google could look at my stuff. How would I know if they ever did? How could I prevent that? It's just, it just comes down to, well, we just have to trust them. We just have to say they're probably not going to. And makes me a little uncomfortable, to be honest. Because you can't trust a giant corporation. I could trust you as an individual. If you give me your word, you're not going to look, then I say, I know you, I trust you as a person, but I can't possibly trust every single one of tens of thousands of people that I've never met, that I don't know what they've agreed to, what penalties there would be if they were discovered snooping into my stuff. Like I know nothing. So for me, it's really hard to just sort of take any cloud provider at their word that my stuff is private. I need to kind of take matters into my own hands, and if anything is even remotely sensitive, I need to encrypt it myself with my own encryption key that they don't have on my computer, and let them store the encrypted copy. But and that's fine. Then it's my responsibility to protect that, not theirs. But pretty much everything in the cloud is, when it comes to security and privacy, is just a matter of trust. And even if the company that provides the services is 100% utterly, perfectly responsible and trustworthy, there's still going to be bugs like Heartbleed that are it's not Google's fault that OpenSSL had this bug. They weren't aware of it, but nevertheless, the stuff that you sent to and from Google was vulnerable for a period of time. So you just trust just kind of doesn't work for solving that problem.
Well, and, the other thing too is certain pieces of information, if they get out, you can sue people, you can fine them, you can do a lot of things, but at the end of the day, they're out.
That's right.
And that can't be undone by any amount of money or any penalty. Flog them if you wish, but it still doesn't get the information back.
That's right. I mean, let's say you work for some airline and you're in charge of their Twitter account, and somebody sends you a lewd photo, and you accidentally click the wrong button, and instead of marking that as spam, it gets sent out to all of that hypothetical airline's Twitter followers. I'm making up an imaginary situation. I mean, I can barely conceive of it happening, but
Yeah, well,
it happens.
And listen, anybody you will admit it, I think, because you're an honest person, and everybody listening and watching to this may not admit to it, but somewhere along the way, we've all hit the reply all or the forward button accidentally, and we've sent something somewhere that it shouldn't have gone. Hopefully, It wasn't bad. Hopefully, it wasn't too bad. But we've done it. We're human, and so even the accident, let alone the malicious stuff, is something you have to be concerned about.
Absolutely. I mean, who among us has not had that like I think I've just made a career limiting move. I have absolutely done that, and afterwards I feel horrified. I feel just like I'm not a bad person. I'm not a dumb person. I cannot believe this happened, but yes, I did the wrong thing. So I think it's. I mean, I hope that we can sort of all learn from this and extend each other a little bit of grace. Say, yes, I'm human too, and I could have made a mistake. But back to your point, once something is out, it's out. You can't unsee that photograph. You can't forget that little snippet of information you learned about someone. It's out, and a reprimand or a lawsuit or a fine afterwards isn't going to change that.
Yeah.
So you got to be careful.
Yeah. Joe, to wrap up, we've talked about a number of specific cases. And any other specific things you go over in the book? I know you talked a lot about sort of the ideas that behind the book and what you're trying to communicate, but any other specific cases that you address in Take Control of the Cloud?
Oh, so many. So I've done something a little bit different with this book. The first chapter is a very long chapter, and it's an FAQ. So it's some of the most common questions I think people have about the cloud, starting with what is the cloud, and going through a whole lot of other things that you may be wondering about. Just explaining what some terms mean, explaining how things like virtual servers work and how the cloud is different from good old-fashioned servers on the internet and stuff like that. So I start with that, and then I take particular things from the FAQ, and then I expand on them in their own chapters. So there is a whole chapter all about security and privacy. It's a very long, very detailed chapter. As I said, a chapter on cloud storage. There's also a chapter on syncing, by which I mean not files, but more like things like email contacts, calendars, bookmarks, passwords, like little pieces of data that you might use the cloud to sync. There's a whole chapter on cloud apps, which of course, again, is everything from an online text editor or image editor to something like Netflix or Hulu. I talk about some other cloud services that you may be interested in, virtual private servers and Amazon's Mechanical Turk and Wolfram Language, a bunch of they're a little bit geeky and they're a little bit outlying, but just to sort of, oh, by the way, this is also out there. You might encounter this at some point. You might at some point feel you have a need for something like this. I just wanted you to know about it a little bit. I have, as anyone would of course expect, I have a whole chapter on backups, which is sort of two things. It's, yes, using whatever Crash Plan or Dolly Drive or something to back up stuff from your computers to the cloud, but also backing up stuff that is only in the cloud to someplace else. So I was at Macworld, and I was talking with Gleb Budman, who runs Backblaze. And, I've known Gleb for another... having a little tongue twister moment here. I've known Gleb for a number of years, and he's a great guy and obviously very knowledgeable about backups, specifically cloud backups. And he told me this story about his wife. It had just happened like the previous week or a couple of days before I talked to him. She was using an online service that lets you create photo books. And so she had uploaded a bunch of photos about their son's entire first year of life, and she had created this 65-page book over a period of months and months and months. It had not just the photos, but a lot of text documenting their son's first year of life, and she was going to make a book out of this to give it to him for his first birthday, right? So, a couple of days before his birthday, she's working on this book online, and she clicks a button that she thinks is going to just clear a particular page, but in fact, it erases the entire book. And there is no evident way from within this web interface to retrieve the book. So she goes into a complete panic, and first thing she says is, honey, we're all backed up, right? You can get my file back for me. And he's like, actually, no, I can't. It was never stored on your computer. It was only stored in the cloud. That's their problem to back up and restore. So she talked to their tech support, and stuff happened, and she was eventually at least able to get the text of the book back, and then she had to re-upload the photos. At least she still had copies of the photos. So it had a mostly happy ending. But the point is, when you put stuff in the cloud, you no longer have control over it. You have to trust that the entity on the other end has proper backups, that they give you access to those backups as a user, and maybe they don't. So the moral of the story is, whether it's email or contacts or documents you create in Google Docs or whatever it is, if you create something in the cloud, also back that up to your computer, because you should never, ever, ever have just one copy of something, whether it's on your own computer or whether it's in the cloud. So I talk about that. And I also have a chapter on, because we talked about our transporters here, I have a whole chapter on the personal cloud. And the personal cloud is basically, if I don't trust cloud providers, which there are a number of reasons that you might not, I want the benefits of the cloud, but I don't want the security risks of the cloud. Could I make my own? And the answer is sort of. You can a little bit, to a certain extent, with some expense and effort. But one of the things you can do, if you want to share files, you get these little, I don't know where I'm pointing there, but anyway, you get the little the little blue-ringed transporter gadgets. And maybe I have one here. Maybe I have one that's at your house. Maybe I have one that's another friend's house. Maybe I have one that's in a data center someplace. And they all just sync stuff to each other, but I own the hardware. Nobody else can, like connect to it and get my stuff if they don't know my password. Use really good passwords. So I can do whatever I want, and it's completely personal to me. And there are ways of setting up, you can set up a Mac with Mac OS X server to provide contact and calendar and bookmark sync and all this other kind of stuff. You could create your own personal cloud by having a couple of Macs that you keep in different places, or there are other gadgets. I mean, the transporter isn't the only one. There's one called Tornado Plug. There are several other, like network attached storage devices that do similar things. But the idea is you can cobble together your own personal cloud of hardware and software that is not part of this public infrastructure like, Amazon and Dropbox and all these big companies that you personally have control over. The downside is it's no longer somebody else's problem. It's your problem. It's relatively easy unless, something major goes wrong. But it is a way of maintaining more control and still getting many benefits of the cloud. So that's a taste. There's more stuff too, but buy the book and you'll learn all kinds of stuff.
It's a topic that's not going away. If anything, it's just going to expand. It's going to become more important, and that's why it's really critical to get a good understanding of the state of the cloud as it is now. That could be a talk of some kind. The state of the cloud. But
the cloud will only expand. I foresee that with climate change in the future, it will be overcast 100% of the time. Yeah. So
the metaphors go on and on. I mean,
that's cloud, the way the wind's blowing.
Yeah, the cloud casts a big shadow. Yeah,
but I take that nebulous, hazy concept and condense it into. I could go on. Anyway,
I was waiting, but. Snow, rain, no, let's not go there.
Yeah.
So how about the specifics, obviously? The book is available at takecontrolbooks.com for how much?
It's $10, and I don't know somewhere around 120 pages, give or take. I don't actually have the final page count in my head, but it's sort of in that range. And like I say, this is not like a highly technical book that you need to like study and do stuff on your computer. You can just put it on your iPad and kick back in the easy chair and just read it. It's a very plain English, ordinary folk, readable book, and my purpose is not to like force you to evaluate a lot of complex topics. It's just to say I'm gonna explain stuff to you as best I can, and I hope that you have a better sense by the time you're done of what is going on with this whole cloud thing and how I can make good decisions now, change my mind in a more intelligent way later, reevaluate as stuff changes. And I think it's a really good book for just ordinary non-propeller heads to get their minds wrapped around the cloud. And
at the risk of repeating it, it's only, and we're joking, but it's going to get more important. There's just no way. So get a good understanding now. Let Joe be your guide. That way you can decide what works for you now and hopefully have a more informed decision-making process going forward.
Right.
Joe, take control of the cloud, takecontrolbooks.com. We'll see you whenever we get to see you because, as you said, your wife is expecting any moment. So
yes.
I hope it won't be too long before we get to see you. But if it is, we completely understand.
I might have a special guest star next time.
That would be great.
Possible.
That might be a first here on MacVoices.
Might be, but yes, I've been through this a couple times before, but I love babies. They're great, and I got my 100% cotton App Camp for Girls shirt on, which is totally it doesn't matter how much baby spit up it gets. It's completely washable, and I'm really looking forward to it.
That's the first time we've ever closed that way, Joe.
oh, just wait, because stuff comes out the other end too. I'm just mentioning it.
On that note, we'll see you soon. Best of luck with everything. Hope it all goes well.
Thank you.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner, and this is MacVoices. We'll be back with more soon. You just never know what's going to show up here, I tell you. Until the next time, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, app.net, Google+, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the MacVoices Dispatch, to stay up to date with all the latest MacVoices news from our front page or at MacVoices.com/newsletter. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at BackbeatMedia.com.